Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Frankly Speaking, and with me tonight is Geetanjali Kirloskar, who is Chairperson and MD of Kirloskar Systems. She started her life, Gitanjali, as a communications, advertising person, now running industry. You've come a long way, Gitanjali. And I read somewhere where you said, out of adversity comes the best performance. How has life treated you in the last 2 or 3 years, especially since the biggest challenge of your life, losing your husband, Vikram Kirloskar?
Thank you, Navika. Firstly, it's wonderful to be on your show and to be in dialogue with you. I have also been an anchor on Times Now, so that makes me a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, life's like that.
Life's like that, yes. Around 18 years ago, I think that's just when Times Now started. Yes, more than 2 years ago, there was a life-altering situation in my life where I got up one morning and I suddenly lost my husband after 40 years. In fact, it was our 39th year of marriage, and 4 months ahead we would have completed 40 years, but that was not meant to be. It was the suddenness of the impact that had me reeling, literally. I felt, and this is how anybody would feel in my situation, I felt my life just breaking into a million pieces. I was numb, I didn't know what has happened, I didn't know why it's happened. There was anger, I was wondering why the sun comes out the next morning as if nothing has happened. It was extremely and deeply grieving. It was shattering. You don't know what to do. You're completely confused and you're completely numb. And however, it took me a couple of days to come out of it. I had to internalize my grief. And I think most importantly, Navika, I realized very early on after Vikram's departure that I had a very large responsibility and that I must stay accountable. Because I realized that the scale of influence and the level at which Vikram and I had brought the business and our network of relationships, the multiple stakeholders who are dependent on what I am now going to do, the way I will react, the way I will emote after this tragedy. There was a lot of responsibility. I felt a sense of great responsibility and I felt I am accountable. And that's the kind of people Vikram and me were. We took our responsibilities and our accountability very, very seriously. So I decided that I would transform my grief into resolve. And I also decided that my purpose would become my anchor and not a person.
Not a person. So you didn't want to depend on any specific person. You didn't want to be dependent. How do women at this age react to the loss of a partner, especially at an age when you said you were going to complete 40 years of marriage? Isn't that really the time when you actually begin to think that now we can chill, we can take a little laid back approach and enjoy other things in life? How did it all happen? Through life, were you independent? In your relationship with Vikram Kirloskar, how did it work out between you two? Were you the independent woman even then, or did it really happen after you lost him?
I was very young when I got married. So 39, 40 years, I knew a lot. I knew only marriage more than I knew any other part of my life.
When did you get married?
I was married when I was 19. And I finished my graduation in commerce and economics after I got married. I was just fortunate to be married into a very progressive family. I was also very clear that I would like to complete my education, and I've always had a career, Navika. So for me, post Vikram, trying to take on the reins of the business and trying to take on the vast network of stakeholder relationships that Vikram had set up, in fact that we together had set up, that was not such a hard part because it's not a bedroom to boardroom walk for me. I've always had a career. I've been, as you know, an advertising and marketing professional for 25 years. I've anchored shows on television. I've written articles for media. So I've always been there on the business platforms of international and global exchange. Also, at one point, I came back into the family business. I joined the family company, Kirloskar Systems, back in about 10 years ago. And that was really a blessing, as we were to realize later, because whilst I was there in these last 10 years, I worked very closely with Vikram on our Japanese partnerships. In fact, I did set up 2 joint ventures with the Japanese independently, with his leadership, but independently. Yes, to go back to your question, how does it feel at this age? You know, we were entering the last phase of our life. We thought this is the last phase. We were entering that, you know, when you go off to the forest kind of phase. Literally, We had bought property in Kunur, an 8-acre property, and we were building a dream house. Vikram was a closet architect, so all the houses, including this house, he designed and I did the interiors. So I had a little say in the architecture and he had a little say in the interiors, so that we could work together on it. And we had this dream and vision that we would retire and escape to Kunur into a house that we have built, and that is how we would end the last decade of our life together. And that the root shock was that you're actually you're pulled back into work. You're pulled back into active participation of life when you had planned for the last 2 years to in fact exit life. You know, so from a sort of entering a calm stage of your life, you're pulled back into turbulence. And hurly-burly and what a turbulence. You know, it's not just a turbulence, exterior turbulence, it's an immense internal grief and loss that you're grappling with. And
your daughter,
yeah,
she was already married then. Did you reach out to her? Was she your support system? How does family behave? How do friends behave when something so tumultuous happens in your life?
You know, Navika, in India you live in a community and you interact with community, and both Vikram and I had multiple and huge network of relationships, business, personal. We also together pursued a lot of different hobbies and interests and sports and music. So in each of those spheres we had another set of friends that we communicated with and interacted with. So there were a lot of views and support coming from different segments of the society and the community. My daughter Mansi was actually, she was expecting. So I was very conscious of the fact that I must not lean too much on her. You know, the first reaction when you're in trauma of a person and when you suffer, the suddenness of the loss was what was very heartbreaking and very, very hard to cope with, because there's no preparedness. And when I realized that my daughter is expecting, I also realized she has a son and she is married and she has a life and family of her own. I was very conscious of the fact that I do not want to lean too much on her. In fact, on the contrary, I believed that she will suddenly feel the loss of a protective cover. She'll suddenly feel subconsciously that there is a blanket that is gone, and very suddenly. I didn't want her to feel that way. I wanted to be her pillar and her strength. So I wanted to make sure that I keep myself resilient so that she can lean on me rather than me using her as an anchor. And as I said, it was very important for me to transform my grief into resolve and to find a purpose. And the purpose that came very naturally to me without internalizing or overthinking it was to carry forward Vikram's legacy to ahead in the future. Whether it's the business or whether it is the multiple stakeholders that we have. In large business, it's not directly only the business. There are many stakeholders that you're engaged with. There's media, there are suppliers, there are influencers, there are bankers, there are also friends in business who influence the way you think and work. There are think tanks, there are public policy forums, there are business and trade associations. You're represented in each of them. You're at a stage where your voice matters. So it was very important for me to take that legacy forward because I felt a sense of responsibility and accountability to all those stakeholders. And I'm not just saying this for effect, I genuinely felt it because this is what Vikram and I together believed in.
So how long did it take you out to come out from your grief and look at life and pick up the reins and move forward? How long did it take you and was it easy?
As I said, having transformed my grief into resolve, and I found a purpose. I made my purpose my anchor rather than a person. That made it a little simpler. I said, it is what it is. And it is not going to go away. Grief is not, it's not something, it's not a problem that can be fixed. There's no handbook. Everyone deals with it in their own individual manner. It was very hard. Navika, I actually jumped into it and put my grief aside and adopted the purpose and defined it and internalized it within 1 week of Vikram's departure. I wanted to take it forward. I wanted to communicate to all stakeholders because I felt that responsibility within me, and to my daughter who was expecting 2.5 months, very critical time for a woman when she is expecting, right? So I wanted all of them to believe and get confidence that yes, she is not broken, she has not collapsed. I may have been broken and collapsed within me, but I'm certainly going to have the strength and the resilience not to have that communicated outside and not to wear it on my sleeve. And look at sympathy and empathy as being the basis of my relationship with my stakeholders. So I moved into it very, very fast. And there's no other way.
Sometimes that sympathy and empathy that comes your way, is uncomfortable to deal with. Did you feel that?
Yes, it is uncomfortable because people have views and you need to respect them. They're saying it because they care. They were views.
Do they?
I think they do. I don't know. Maybe to some extent there are some people who felt uncomfortable watching me get into the practical mode and get into work mode and get into a more normal life so fast. Maybe they did feel, but it wasn't something they communicated very directly. They perhaps felt it. It didn't matter. There again, you have to be very strong because there are going to be multiple perspectives and views because you're engaged with so many stakeholders on so many platforms, and you can't blame them because they come from their frame of reference. They come from their mindset. They come from their worldview. So you can't blame them. So it was important for me I was prepared. I knew that whilst there's going to be empathy and sympathy, there'll be a lot of advice. For example, one of the advice I did receive was not to jump into life so fast, to take some time off, to be kind to myself, to see a counselor, perhaps look at some anti-anxiety medication because I did find it hard to. I fell asleep, but I would get up. Even now I do. And I recently read some research that you get up between 2 and 3 when you suffer from this anxiety syndrome. And that's bang on at 2:10 I get up. And I'm then again fast asleep by 3. So it does happen. The gaps reduce. You learn to deal with it. For me, Navika, it was important to be able to deal with my grief in my own way, with my own mind. My own mind and my own internal power, my own resilience had to be my biggest anchor. I had to hold myself. I didn't want to lean on anything or anyone because your children have your own life. I'm not a mother that believes that you should impose or you should cling to your children or your parents or to your siblings. They have their own life. They can be part of your life. They can help you with your life, but they can't live your life.
Their life cannot come to a standstill because of you.
They can't live your life for you.
Absolutely. But when you went into the boardroom, when you met up with your business associates, partners, your own team, how did they react? Did they react to you as a boss from day one? Or women as bosses, there are still some hurdles before men can accept it?
So there are different dimensions to the situation and the question you've asked. First, it's less about being a woman and more about being a wife coming to the forefront. You see, when your daughter or your son or a sibling takes the lead on a business platform in a legacy business, the acceptance for some reason, maybe socio-cultural, traditional, I don't know, but for some reason, the acceptance is a lot more natural. When a wife steps out and takes the lead, it is a little harder. And I don't blame them, Navika. I am not the person who believes that I should naturally be accepted. No. I believe that you have to work. In fact, that became a challenge for me. And I decided that I will work doubly hard to win over their confidence and to win over their respect by the work that I do. Not by conflicting in language or by being aggressive, because I'm not a rebel by nature. That's not how I work. I like to work in harmony with my traditions and with the environment in which I live. So I worked a lot more harder. I reached out to them. The good thing is that I was already walking the path with Vikram. I was already engaged in the business with him. The difference was I was following and he was leading. At the end of the day, he was an MIT engineer. He was absolutely brilliant. He had a legacy surname behind him and he worked very hard. So naturally, he was leading and he was the icon. I was following, but I was working shoulder to shoulder with him. As I said, it was not a bedroom to boardroom. So there was a level of acceptance. A lot of people had already dialogued with me and worked with me on different business and personal platforms. But when you are a wife and you suddenly step in and you take a lead and you just have the loss of your husband behind you by 7 to 10 days and you're sitting there trying to take the lead and not showing your vulnerability. I did not show it because I wanted to be perceived as someone strong and I wanted a book to be written on me or I wanted to become a woman icon, none of those things. I presented a strong front because I was concerned that I must give all my stakeholders the confidence that there is going to be a seamless transition, that I am all there and I will work very, very hard to take it forward on the same shared values and on the same principles that both Vikram and I had spent 30 years in building.
Was it easy?
No, it's not at all easy.
How did you work on yourself?
It-
What did you have to do with yourself to be able to bring that confidence to the fore so that other people felt more stable and confident?
You know, Navika, one way, as we said, is to have anchors, is to have your mother and your children staying closer to you. I have friends whose children have moved in after such an episode, or parents have shifted in, but I had them leave in about 7 days. I said, let me deal with this myself. I will deal. If I need, I know that you're there when I need you. So that was one part of it. Second, I tend to internalize things. It was not easy at all. I mean, there are nights I still get up with deep anxiety. I have a lot of self-doubt. I look very confident, but even before this interview, I do suffer crisis of confidence before critical
Why?
meetings, before
Nobody would imagine
before
that.
Navika's interview. Because I think there's a lot more at stake, Navika. You see, earlier, somebody asked me, how have you changed? I said a couple of things. I always now wear my seat belt. Even if I'm going to the end of the road and it's a 5-minute drive, I wear my seat belt. Vikram spent 39 years in convincing me to wear a seat belt on the highway. That was the one thing we always argued about. He would get very irritated. You know, he said, be safe. I mean, there's no bravado in this. Just wear your seat belt. I always tie my shoelaces, and I tie them tight, properly, and I recheck them 3 times before I do my jogging or my gym. So I have become a lot more cautious, and there is a lot more anxiety. You know, there is a lot more at stake, and that is why there's anxiety. That's why that crisis of confidence, because now if I fall or I make a mistake, there is no one to pick me up. I just have to keep the muscles of my arms and legs very, very strong so that I can pick myself up and start walking again. The third thing I do, Navika, is I tend to internalize. I love reading verses, and words have a great impact on me. More than what I hear and more than music, I enjoy reading words, and they have a great impact. So I read a beautiful piece about Isaac Perlman, the very famous violinist. He suffered from polio as a child, and he was on a wheelchair in an orchestra when, just as he started playing, and he was a few bars into a piece, one string of his violin broke with a very loud snap. Everyone on stage thought that either he would move out, he would excuse himself, or he would ask for a new violin, or he would just terminate his piece and he would go, because we know that it's impossible to play a symphonic work with just 3 strings. But he played on, and not only did he play on without stopping, the important thing is he played on with the same passion, the same conviction, and the same love for music. And do you know, that night he created his most beautiful music. That was the finest piece of music that this famous violinist ever created. There was a hall loud in applause, and they asked him later, how did you do this? So he said, our job is to play with what's left. And you play your best music with it.
But every once in a while, it comes up. And I read somewhere you said grief is not linear.
Comes
it has
in
no
waves.
one. It comes in waves. It still does.
It still does. Like I said, it comes in waves and with this little slightest of trigger. A lot of my work, and that's the positive part of what I do, that's one of the reasons why carrying forward Vikram's work and legacy has actually enormously helped me to cope. Because he's still around in many ways. He's omnipresent through his work, through what he has done, and I'm on the same stage, I'm on the same platform, right? So sometimes when we are in meetings with my Japanese partners, and they love him from their heart, that's the impact he had on everybody he met. So often they refer to a strategic insight that he had given them 8 years ago or last year, or they refer to a WhatsApp message regarding some decision that he took just a month before he passed away. So that suddenly in the middle of a meeting, it triggers a memory, and you suddenly realize that he's not there. You feel the void in a hall full or a boardroom full of very, very important people in a very important, meaningful discussion. So it does hurt you at that point, but you have to recover. You know, Navika, there is no choice.
Has it ever happened to you that, you know, that wave of memories has, you know, put you in a situation where your eyes well up, just like they did just now? You know, something that comes crowding into your mind. And how do then people in the boardroom treat you? Or have you never allowed that mask to slip away?
No. At work, I have not. Because again, I have been conscious of the fact that all the stakeholders whom I engage with on multiple platforms, in multiple aspects of my business and work, must not for any reason feel guilty or uncomfortable that they have to have me engaged. Because there are important decisions, there are important subjects to be looked into. There are more joint ventures I would like to do with my business partners, with my Japanese partners. So we have to engage in dialogue. They have to see me ready for it. They have to see that I do have the same risk appetite, that I do have that resilience to continue. So I don't want them to feel apprehensive about it. And that's not because of the impact it will have on me, because I feel responsible and I feel accountable. And when you reach that position, you have to be responsible and accountable. You cannot indulge yourself.
But you're human too.
Yes. So that comes out in my weaker moments when I'm by myself, or when I'm, the big Indian family came to my rescue, Navika. My multiple aunts, cousins and relatives, I told them just one thing. Whilst I won't have them as my anchors, I had decided, but I said, please keep visiting. And they took that very seriously, so they don't, most of the times I'm not alone. Even today I have a cousin staying with me. So at all
So you have
times,
a large family.
I have a huge family from both sides. My mother's a Kashmiri Pandit, my father's a Maharashtrian, and I don't come from a business family. I come from a family of bureaucrats, diplomats, and the next generation is in our very, very top level professionals in finance. They have their own funds, private equity. So it's been very nice for me because they're all very qualified, extremely educated, very independent, and very strong and very, very close to me. So I'm able to call them and take advice, and very often emotionally when you're saying breakdown, when I'm at that breakdown point, there's always an aunt and uncle at home, there's always a cousin and nephew. So I with them, my vulnerability comes out fully. I don't even allow it to come out too much in front of my own daughter.
So that you become the father and the mother and
Yes.
the...
Yes.
And most parents want to keep that cover on their children.
Yes, yes.
They never...
Yes.
I completely understand what you're saying, but do you really come across gender biases? Maybe not in your own boardroom, but when you go out, because you are members of various, as you said, think tanks, various platforms, various systems where you work on industry fora, with government, with your found forum with Indo-Japanese trade, etc. Are there biases towards women?
Navika, as I said, I have not felt woman bias as much as the fact that now the wife is trying to take over from the husband's platform. That maybe that wife also falls in a gender, in the territory of a gender, right? That happens, yes. That does happen, but I accept it. I accept
Why?
it. Because, Navika, that's how it is. You work hard and you not by fighting, not by raising slogans and speaking and writing about women empowerment. That's not how I work. I would rather convince them, and beyond a point, if they're not convinced, so be it, because what I'm committed to is the task, the purpose and the subject. So I give myself entirely to adding value to the subject matter of the discussion, to my business model, or to any engagement that I have with any stakeholder. I focus on that. Now, if at the other end, there is a gender bias and I see a certain restriction, a certain inhibition in accepting my perspective or my point of view in its entirety, then I better work that much harder to ensure that the content of my work speaks for itself, and that it is so good and it adds such tremendous value to the dialogue that the other person has no option but to accept, to comply, and over a period of time, I have seen some of them even now give increased respect. And the validation of that point is that they reach out to me more than I reach out to them. They seek it out more than I seek it out.
It's easier for men than for women, but
certainly,
that you admit?
Certainly. I will always admit. If
Even
Vikram
if
had
the
been
women
left
are smarter?
100%. It is easier. And that is a reality. You'll find that I'm quoting a lot, and this is not pre-planned, but I quote because, as I said, you asked me what helps me to cope. Words and reading and internalizing really helps me to cope. And as Marx said, these may not be his exact words, but in his 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, written in 1852, he said, men write their own history, but they do not write it as they please, in circumstances pre-selected by them, but in circumstances that are a given and transmitted from the past. Right? So that this is what helps me cope. These are the circumstances that you're left with. You have to cope. You have to find a coping mechanism that makes you come out winning. Right?
So you run this Indo-Japanese trade forum. You're also the honorary counsel for Finland. How do you see global acceptance of Indian women in the workspace? What kind of work do you do with them, and how do they treat you? Is there this sense of the wife coming in even there, or you are an individual, Gitanjali Kirloskar, meeting these people at your own terms?
Yes. So there are 3 different global platforms that I'm currently engaged in. One, the most active, of course, is India-Japan. There I'm engaged in facilitating structured dialogue between Indian and Japanese businesses as required by different trade associations, business forums, platforms, sometimes even the government. Like, for example, I'm co-chair of the India-Japan Business Council for CII. Also, I also work very closely now with JETRO, Japan Exchange Trade Organization, advising them. There's renewed and very accelerated interest of the Japanese startups and MSMEs to enter India and seek partnerships with India. In the India-Japan platform, I have never ever experienced any kind of hostility or even a little lack of acceptance, wife, woman, mother, in any platform, in any gender. I think, Navika, the reason is specific to the Japanese. The reason is, I think they believe in respect and courtesy. It's a way with them. Whatever goes on in their mind internally, once they are
face to face.
When they are face to face, they have already accepted you while they've walked up to you. And they've accepted you when they leave, because if you are content, if you have substance, and if they feel that you are contributing, and if they feel you have shared values, much like any relationship or engagement, then they walk out with respect. There I have not faced much of a problem. Yes, sometimes in some of the associations and trade bodies and meetings with other stakeholders in India, yes, you tend to sometimes. So what I do sometimes when I feel that they are asking some of us industrialists to say a few words at the end of the meeting, give our perspective on the subject, sometimes I raise my hand and said, excuse me, could I have the last word, please? Even though I'm a woman, but may I have the last word? I just smile and I say it. And they are very sweet after that. They're very indulgent. So they said,
but they would overlook you unless you raise.
Well, I did see my name being called out, and the session was ending.
And you make yourself heard.
Yeah, kind of very.
Kudos to you.
No, I just.
From one woman to another.
Yes, I know.
Feels good, that a woman stands up and say, excuse me, I also exist, and would you stop glossing over and just doing boys' room chat?
Yeah, sometimes, you see, I look at it this way, Navika. My perspective is, perhaps they overlooked adding my name to seeking my view, because they yet, maybe in that there are forums where I've already been engaged, so there's a lot of confidence, life goes on as usual. And I was able to lead a seamless transition after Vikram there. But there are 1 or 2 where I'm stepping in, maybe for the first time, maybe they've seen me there, dialoguing with them as Vikram's wife and not as Gitanjali. So there might be a little issue like this.
There's never a helping hand?
Not really. I don't really, I
you
don't
freeze. If somebody tries to.
Yeah, I don't want much of a helping hand. I'm quite okay. I've worked all my life. I've been a career person from the age of 21. I was hosting a show on Times Now, 38 episodes, when I was about, 35? So
life's
I was,
like
life's like that. So it was.
And that was your show.
Yes.
And
it was about life.
It was about life.
Yes.
I still remember the talk show when we just joined. That was amongst our pilot shows when the channel was launched in 2006, January.
Yes.
That was a weekend show that you used to do. You've come a long way, Gitanjali. I just want to ask you, who was Gitanjali Kirloskar? Has she changed in the last 2 or 3 years?
Right now, Navika, I am not a person who suffers the kind of grief and loss that I have suffered. I am on very firm ground. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm standing. I have planned my future to whatever extent I can. I know destiny will play its part, but I have planned my future for myself.
Run a fantastic enterprise in partnership with Toyota. while all other car sales were down in February, it was your company where a 13% robust car sale growth was seen. How was that?
So as an investor in auto and as an investor in our joint venture, I was very, very happy to see that. Especially after Vikram, there was a little bit of concern that business should move with the same strength and resilience, because there's a lot of turbulence in the market, as we know. I think the company is at a size and a scale where it isn't a market leader as such. They don't have a very large share of the market. So if there is a turbulence or if consumption drops, it first hits the leaders. So to that extent, we're, I think, at the right size right now. Second, the price points that we target are price points which surprisingly were not that price sensitive. To give you an example, it's very interesting for me to have understood that in the last 2-3 years, I find if you look at the passenger vehicle sales, 60% comes from SUVs. In fact, the growth rate in passenger vehicles has been lower at the entry-level models. It's higher in the mid to high-price brands in which my company or my company is present in. And the reason for that, Navika, is the very rapidly growing large middle class with a certain level of premiumization of the middle class, where the upwardly mobile middle class in India is willing to spend a little more for a better quality product and service.
What do you think about electric vehicles, the environment, not really taking off in India?
It will, Navika. There in the early adoption curve, there is a stage, there is a time. The government is giving it enormous impetus and support. Individuals are now realizing it. This is not an easy country to sell any product or service to. India is not easy. There is so much, there's diversity of landscape, there's diversity of beliefs, people are used to a certain way, not everyone switches that easily, there are difficulties and price sensitivities across different target consumers, and it's an early adoption curve. So I think it is going through that stage, and eventually I'm sure there will be adoption.
But do you think the auto market or overall the slowdown in the consumer durables market is an issue for worry, especially amidst this whole tariff war kind of situation that is impending starting 1st of April, depending on what the United States starts doing. Are you sensing turbulence?
Navika, I actually believe in the India story. I believe that there is a drop in consumption, certainly. Corporates have seen a decline in their performance in the last 2 quarters, certainly. But I believe there are 2 things. I believe that there has been a little bit of a market correction after COVID. And our growth is still pegged at 6.2 to 6.5%, which is not bad if you compare it globally. Second, I believe in the India story. I believe that it is India's century and it is India's moment. I believe that global supply chains could shift in India's favor, given the global rebalance and India's position in that rebalance for the reasons that you said, geopolitics. I believe there is scope and potential for a +1 business model in the global supply chain for India. And I believe that with the efforts that are currently being put in, in fact, we're all anxiously waiting to see what comes out of the tariff wars, because increased nationalism could be a threat to some businesses. So that is something that industry would be a little apprehensive about. Everyone's watching and waiting. There is turbulence. But if you look at it, I think India has been impacted a little less than most countries of the world.
So you do a lot of Kirloskar scholarship for Japanese language training at the Bangalore City University. Do many Indian kids come in for Japanese training, and are they qualified then to work in Japan? How does this work, and what kind of work do you put in there?
It was very interesting. The Bangalore City University had invited me for a program that they launched for Japanese language for students. And a lot of them came from lesser privileged backgrounds, and they saw this as an employment opportunity. Obviously, maybe the government from Japan or the embassies had reached out and they had sort of expressed a requirement for such manpower. So I found that they had this language, and I found a lot of young boys and girls were lesser privileged. They didn't have the income streams that would allow them to see through the education of 2 years. And I said, Kirloskar is participative in India-Japan. We are invested with India-Japan on very large and multiple businesses. So I again felt a sense of responsibility, and we said we will sponsor some of those students to completion of their program. And I think, Navika, there is great potential for Indian skilled manpower for employability in Japan, as it is in many other parts of the world. And I have been reading and dialoguing with trade forums and the government, and it appears to be one of their objectives as well. Now, there is a little issue here. There's a little point that must be noted. Whilst you can train them and you can skill them up on the job, you can teach them different aspects of the work culture, you can skill them to a very high level where they will be acceptable for employability in countries like Japan. What is very important is to also train them on mind and body culture. It's not just the language and the skilling that will help. Unless the work and the living culture of that country is integrated into their training program, until it is embedded in the training program, it will not be possible for them to find employment, yes, but they won't sustain.
True.
So the next step that I want to take with a school like this in a small way is to see how we can integrate and have the language, but also have the the work, the mind and body.
The kind of food they eat. I mean, I think half a teaspoon of oil through the day, and here in India, our food habits,
yes,
the masala and the curries that we have,
yes,
you'd never be able to
it's
think
very
of
difficult, very difficult.
in Japan, clearly. But you've been awarded the Knight First Class of the Order of the Lion of Finland for 15 years of meritorious. That's a huge award.
Yeah.
I mean, what do these awards, what do these recognitions mean to you?
Navika, they validate for your own self that you're delivering and giving the value addition that is required. Sometimes you need those validations. I am not one who says, I don't like awards, I won't accept, oh, there's no feel good in it for me, I'm very secure in myself. You know, these are a lot of the statements that in social dialogue, they do come up in such a manner. But I believe that awards, if they're real and they're genuine, they help to validate for yourself, not for the public, but for yourself. And the giver of the award feels equally fulfilled, because it also validates for them the value addition that you've given, and they believe that they have selected and chosen well. So 14 years back, it was very interesting. Finland was doing a book on Indian women entrepreneurs and their parallel in Finland, and they spoke to me, they came here, the ambassador spent a day with me, the book was published in Finland, and then they said they need an honorary consulate in Bangalore, and they somehow felt, though I've never done anything in Finland, it's not like Japan, where there's a natural instinct to be able to add value, but they said we would like your help and support in integrating the Finnish companies in Karnataka, because you have a sphere of influence in the state, big business, and you are a communications sort of person. So we believe that it will be very nice for us to have you represent our country here. So I did a lot of work as they require. There are a lot of delegations that come. I want to, in fact, now increase my value addition on these platforms as well. I really would like to do that, because today it is so important to have a larger worldview. You cannot live insular today. So if I have some of these platforms, and I'd like to engage a lot more to enhance my own worldview.
Your worldview, and to add to the India story and the connectivity with the rest of the world. So Gitanjali, towards the end, I just want to ask you, who was Gitanjali Kirloskar? Has she changed in the last 2 or 3 years? What is it that makes you tick now? You're a grandmother. What satisfies you most? The role as a grandmother, a mother, a professional, taking India forward. What is it that makes you tick?
Right now, Navika, I am not a person who suffers the kind of grief and loss that I have suffered. When you speak to people in society, when you speak to professionals, they often look at you and they tell you that it's okay if you're on shaky ground. It doesn't matter. Take each day as it comes. Don't worry about the future. Leave it to God and destiny. We are there for you. Lean on us. Indulge yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. I have not believed or followed any of these sermons or any of this way of thinking. I am on very firm ground. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm standing. I have planned my future to whatever extent I can. I know destiny will play its part, but I have planned my future for myself. I'm very, very clear and very focused that for the next few years, I want to equip myself and build myself up and work extremely hard round the clock if it needs to be, to ensure that I can provide more and more value addition to my partnerships and to my joint ventures with the Japanese. And I really want to do that, not only also because I want to carry forward Vikram's legacy, but because I believe that it was our journey together. I owe it to my businesses, I owe it to my people. I'm very, very clear that I want to contribute greater value. I want to set up more joint ventures with my Japanese partners if it comes up, if the opportunity comes up. That is, I'm very clear on that. Second, at a personal level, there is a huge emotional gap that Vikram has left. We were a very integrated, we had a very integrated partnership, and it was, you speak of men and women, it was a relationship of equal at all points of time. In different situations, it may vary, the weightages may vary, but it averaged out to 50-50 at all points of time. So there's a huge emotional gap that he's left behind. One of the things that I'm doing and I'm really enjoying, Navika, is I want to stay curious. Okay, because that gives me the intrinsic motivation to learn. We were both a very curious couple. We enjoyed art, we enjoyed history, we enjoyed music, we experimented with the kind of theatre we went to, we experimented with the kind of friends we made. Sometimes they were very much on the fringe, so it was very interesting and exciting. So that is something at a personal level I want to continue with and learn and do a lot more in different fields that I'm good at, theatre for example, or cinema for example, in addition to my work.
Oh, cinema.
Cinema, I
and
love.
Theatre?
Yes, I love theatre and cinema.
Oh, on the other side or just as a...
No, I want to act. I love acting. Yes, as a child, I acted. And in my school play, my father was told by a very reputed director of that time, and he said, absolutely no. My daughter will not join cinema. She will not act as such. But you know, surprisingly, it is Vikram who encouraged me. So I acted in 2 films 3 years after I got married.
Okay, which one?
One was Girish Karnad's Chelavi, and the other was with Sushmita Sen on Samay. It was called Samay. I had a character role, and when I saw her, I said, oh my God, she's so glamorous and she's so confident. And I quickly called Vikram. I said, I'm running out of this set. He said, complete it, finish it, run out if you want to, but that's your, you know,
your call.
Your call. But he said, I mean, I wouldn't do that. Enjoy it. You're going there to enjoy it. This is not going to be the basis of your career for the future. Even if it were, enjoy it. So he said it so simply and casually that it repositioned the role as not being that critical, you know. So I took it as it came. So I did that. So I would love to do that if I get an opportunity, but that will have to be a little later because I need to focus on my work. I'm greatly looking forward to attending the graduation of my 2 grandchildren. And to my graduation lunch and dinner for them. Or I was thinking the other day I must have flowers like this. You know.
How old are they?
One, my granddaughter is almost 2 and my grandson is 5. And
graduation?
तो बहुत साल है. But then, as I said, we're planning the future, right? We
really
want
planning ahead.
Yes, we don't want the future to look hazy. We want to have certain things.
Okay,
but there is
so
one
there are
thing.
2 and 5, and you're already planning their graduation lunches and dinners. Amazing. That's called Zest for Life.
There is one other strategic long-term plan that I have not shared with you, which is extremely important to me. There's a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and that is to bring my golf handicap down. This is singularly, Navika, the most important strategic long-range plan that I have set for myself.
How much time are you spending golfing?
That is the problem. So I think that my handicap has gone way beyond 2 digits. The highest form, I think I haven't played in the last 2-3 months. So I want to, in 5 years, bring it back to where it was, which is between 16 and 18. In 10 years, I want to be a single handicapper. In 10 years, I want to have won 3 to 4 meaningful tournaments. That will give me, for all the golfers who are watching the show, they will confirm to you that this gives the highest form of fulfillment ever.
Amazing. Amazing. You're, what can I say? You're a bundle of energy, Gitanjali. You're a bundle of thoughts, passion, planning ahead for your grandchildren's graduation when they're still 2 and 5 really shows me that life's like that. Zest for life must remain, and curiosity, of course, that should lead one on to, I think, transcend several barriers and reach for the moon and the stars. More power to you, more power to your dreams, Gitanjali, and may you always be full of beams and reaching out for the stars. Thank you very much for joining me
Thank you so
on
much,
Frankly
Navika.
Speaking.
Thank you so much.
It's been so lovely to speak to a woman who's seen the softer side of life, who's vulnerable also, but just so very completely driven to change the narrative of what women are supposed to be. More power to you and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Navika, and it's been wonderful being in this dialogue with you, also because when I read about the fearless and the relentless aspect of your journalism, it actually motivates me, because I need that strength.
Oh my God.
It's been wonderful.
If that's a compliment,
I look up to you a lot as much as you.
Gitanjali, if that's a compliment,
it is great compliment.
I shall store it in a nice little chip in a corner of my heart. But
thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so very much.
Thank you.